Excellent. All right. So today's talk, I want to thank ETH Zurich and Adam for inviting me to this call. I'm going to keep it very brief on the lecture side of things so we can jump straight into how I use virtual reality in my design workflow. I'll give you a quick introduction about myself and how I started using the software. I'll go into a few examples and evidence on why using virtual reality helps your designs. I'll talk a little bit about visualization and what that means. Then I'll give you a little difference that I've noticed between regular CAD modeling versus virtual reality modeling and virtual reality sketching. We'll go into a little bit more details on that. And then I'll jump right into my workflow there. All right. So just to let you know a little about me, if you don't know too much, I'm a senior industrial designer at a company called Peak Design in San Francisco. I've been designing products for about 10 years. I've released products in much of different industries, including toys, cycling, some robots for a few different clients. And now I'm doing camera and photography gear as of the last year. I've been using Gravity Sketch for a little over 2 years. I've been an early beta tester with them since the first Oculus Quest headset came out. And from day one, I've really begun to integrate it into my workflow and use it pretty much on a daily basis now for real design work. Right on. Over the last year, when I joined this design team, I've been also integrating it as part of our entire tool set as a team. We're about 6 designers, and we started setting up co-creation and collaboration rooms to design our projects together virtually from different locations, but also do design reviews with engineers, with design managers, and CEO even. So it's been a pretty useful tool set to have there. So I want to talk a little bit about why this is a good thing. The biggest is that it gives people, individuals, the power to communicate ideas in space. This is instantaneous. You can, once you put on your headset, you create things in 3D from day one, immediately. You get, like I'm saying, instant visual results. You can create geometry in real time. It's all based on point splines. So you put points in space and the line goes around it. From there, you can build out surfaces from meshes or even subdivisional modeling. I'll go into some of the differences of those and how I use them on my demo. Also, the user experience is very intuitive, and it relies on a simple set of rules. The way that they describe it are, and these are very important, once you get used to these, anybody will be able to pick them up. It's physicality. It's a little bit more than just drawing with your hand. It's good to use your whole body, move around. Immediacy, anything that you try, it's there in front of you, like I said. It's language agnostic. So it relies more on a set of visual icons and 3-dimensional icons instead of text. And last of all, and I think it's very important, is that it's playful and it allows you to have fun while you're in the software. And lastly, like I mentioned before, it's really allowed, especially during these times, collaboration and co-creation from really anywhere in the world. And hopefully we can try a little bit of that today. So I want to touch on visualization a little bit. That is, to me, the biggest thing that Gravity Sketch adds. So why do we want to visualize stuff? So whether you're an artist, a designer, an architect, or just a creative person, we have a need to visualize our concepts, our ideas. And whether that is to validate the feasibility of what you're making for yourself or to communicate it to somebody else, you need to see what that idea looks like other than just a thought. So in the past, we have been able to visualize our ideas through two-dimensional methods, whether that's writing, sketching, or 3D methods, such as making maquettes or models or sculptures or depictions with your hands. And now the new workflow with VR sketching is that you can lift the expressiveness of drawings to a three-dimensional space very, very quickly. So it's just adding an extra layer, an extra dimension to visualizing your ideas quickly. So with this, it allows us to validate, communicate our ideas just much faster than before and share them with others with just a lot quicker. So I want to here just show you again a visualization of a common 3D visualization method that's been used, by product development companies or anybody designing physical objects for the longest time. You have an idea in your head, and it's usually visualized in 3D. So then you have to depict that idea on a flat medium, on paper or a digital sketch, usually to communicate it to somebody. Usually when you draw something out, it informs your idea. You can see it a little better. So that's a back and forth process. Once you have a solidified concept in paper, you go into CAD or make a computer model. But here it's still a flat medium. It's through a computer screen. This might inform your sketches. You go back and forth again. And after those three first steps, you can decide to make a physical prototype. And that's where you go from a 3D idea for the first time through a 3D visualization of what it is. So the biggest time chunks happen in that translation between a 3D concept to a 2D paper and back and forth. And that's where we spend most of the time. These are called time sinks because you really have to interpret from one dimension to the other, back and forth. So with VR, what we're trying to do is skip those translations between dimensions. So you can think in 3 dimensions, virtually sketch it in 3 dimensions and to scale exactly how you want it. There's not that much time lost in translating between the two. You can then take that 3D sketch, bring it into CAD for further definition. And there's another time sink eliminated. And this allows you to make decisions much quicker with a higher level of confidence as to what you think that physical prototype should be. So by incorporating VR, in my experience, you can go from a 3D idea to a 3D concept or a 3D prototype much faster. And you're potentially shrinking the time of these steps in a real world setting from weeks or months to potentially just days. Cool. So the way that the software works today, there's several different outcomes that are possible with the VR tool. These are some of the 4 that they highlight that I use quite often and that are very good. I'll give you a quick explanation on all of these. First is freeform sketching. You can just go into the space and start doodling in 3-dimensional lines, like the one you see on the left. Second is sketch over package, is what they call it, which is bringing in a predetermined CAD volume that is dimensioned or constrained or has measurements. And then you use those as you're defining volume to sketch your lines over. The third one is to bring in, and these are interchangeable. Of course, you can do all of them at the same time or one over another. The third one is to bring in your 2D sketches and pull the 3D lines from them. So you start by drawing over the lines as accurately as you can, if you want to, and then just pull them into a 3D medium. And the third one is a very new feature for them. This has been available for teams for a while, but now it's available to most people. It's co-creation sessions. So that means you can get into the same virtual space with another Quest user or another VR user and do all of these things at the same time together and keep a reference of where the other person is in space as well. So the reason this works really well for design reviews is you can see where the other person is looking, you can see what they're doing, and it really feels like an immersive in-person session, which leads to a lot of breakthroughs usually in design teams. Cool. I'll talk a little bit about the differences between CAD and VR sketching and why they're still both important, but why using some of them for some purposes over others. For the big history of these tools, CAD programs focus on what we call the last mile of the design journey, where the goal is to get something rendered or produced, 3D printed, or just get it to mass manufacturing. Now, VR sketching focuses on the first mile of the design journey, the very, very beginning, where you just want to get an idea from your head into 3 dimensions as fast as possible. This is great whether it's just in your head or you have a quick napkin sketch or even a fully dimensioned plan drawing. It's just to get it into 3D quickly. Another advantage, now VR tools over just the last couple of years are finally sophisticated and good enough to allow you to do real design work. And like I mentioned before, most importantly, they are just fun, really fun to use and get into. Now, with traditional CAD, the reason there's a little bit of that disconnect and those time sinks that I talked about is because you have to interpret these 3-dimensional objects from plan views. So you have to be pretty aware of what the side of it is going to look like from the beginning, what the top is going to look like, what the front is going to look like. And you have to change between all those views to place these points in XYZ coordinates. So before you get into 3-dimensional volume or a shape, there's a lot of translation between sides that you have to do. Now, when you're in VR, you can just place those lines and points in space quickly, pretty much exactly where you want them to be. This is now possible because the double lenses, you have stereo vision, you have parallax in the lenses. So the sense of depth that you get from the controllers is pretty much exactly where you think it would be in space. And there's not a lot of things lost from you creating shapes. On top of that, you have real scale modeling, you have automatic symmetry, which allows you to only worry about one side of a product if it's something symmetrical. And this way you're really training your brain to see these lines as 3D curves in space. So very quickly you can get a better understanding of that line. On top of that, another huge benefit is if you're making objects that are bigger than a person, as you can see on this boat on the right here, is you can, from far away, see the entirety of the object really quickly, but immediately you can jump to a variety of perspectives and jump between them instantly. You can experience something from the inside, from the outside, from below. This really enables true immersion and understanding of the design and its attributes. Another thing I want to say is that working in 3D sketching will improve your 2D sketching as well. That's something I've noticed that a lot of other designers share. Why does this happen? The more you can plot lines in space and discover and define this form as you go, you can just get a mental image of this thing in many different directions. So it eliminates you having to figure out what it's going to look like in many sides. You just do it in space, and this allows you to right away see it, how it's going to be from wherever you want to look at it. So you can just discover what we call form finding on an object much quicker. Another thing is VR sketching allows you to focus on the craft of sketching. But what I mean by that is you can discover and develop the line quality attributes of a good sketch. And this is, if you guys are familiar, just the gesture of a line or the speed or the balance or thick to thin transitions and which lines have hierarchy over other lines. So with these two sketches, what I want to show is that once you define those lines, the surfaces and the volumes come really quickly, but I still want to emphasize that line building is probably the best way to do form finding in VR. What this last video showed is that once you have the object, it's much easier to capture it. You don't have to worry about redrawing it. You can pull out screenshots in any focal length or perspective that you want from any angle, really, at that point. Cool, we're about to get in there and demonstrate how I work with this program. Before I do, I just want to say what is helpful for jumping right into VR. What do you need to get started? Really not much other than a VR headset and Gravity Sketch. There are other drawing apps, but that one I found to be the most unconstrained and expressive and easier to get into. So what do you really need? Just a desire or some previous experience. Hopefully you guys have that with just creating and making things with your hands, making objects. Like these kids here, if you can understand how to have surfaces that are defined by wireframes or lines in space or 3D curves, that will usually help you. So hopefully you guys have some kind of understanding in that. And on the right side, if you want to create just slightly more precise models that are very accurate to your idea, so having the ability to understand how 3D shapes are created as outcomes from well-defined orthographics or plan views, usually 3 or 2, side, front, top. So if you can pull a 3D object from side, from top views, then that's really going to help you as well. Cool. So here, for the purpose of this session that we're going to do in VR, I'm just going to preface a little bit. I modeled one of our Peak Design backpacks as an example. I'll give you basically a walkthrough of my entire workflow of how I go from an idea to a fully realized 3D model. So how do I do these designs? I usually design seated. And when it comes time to experience a design, that's when I stand up and I walk around the whole thing. Why do I do this? Because when you become good at drawing, you have these muscle memory on your hands, your shoulder, your wrist, and that usually carries over into 3D sketching. Even though you're incorporating another dimension, I still like to draw and create within the same space as if I'm creating something in 2 dimensions. So usually around this space. So that's why I'm seated. An office chair really helps because you can, go around and really swivel and draw stuff in not only in 3D space in front of you, but also around you and really use that 3rd dimension. The second thing I want to say is once you get good enough and proficient enough with CAD, the lines and the line quality that you're able to develop, that's going to carry some of that handcraftedness that we talked about. So your 3D sketches, your 3D VR models will end up having a gestural quality and a specific flavor or a specific style that you bring to the table. So they'll end up looking like your own sketches. That's something that's not possible in CAD. So CAD models usually all look the same and they differ between CAD programs, but a VR sketch can have a very personal quality to it. Cool, that's what I'll say. I'll leave it on the slide. I'm going to put on my headset. Let me stop sharing here for a second. Cool. So from here on, I think what I'll do is put in my headset, share my point of view, and I will have that as the screen. And if you guys can make that full screen, then that'll be great. And then we'll go from there. Just give me a second. Okay, here we are. Okay, and you should all be seeing inside of my headset. Are we good?
Yes.
Okay, since I can't see you guys, so some audio feedback would be great. Thank you. Excellent. Cool. So I'm sure you're all familiar with the lobby of Gravity Sketch. Here we are. I'm going to go into my sketch. I just want to show you the final result really quickly. This is the model we'll be looking at. We go to 1:1 scale. And it's one of our peak design backpacks. This is a very quick, just to visualize the concept. It's basically made up of curves, 3D curves, and surfaces, and we should be able to recreate this whole thing here in this session. So I'll go through my setup and just recreate what we've done here. So a few things I want to say about setup is I really recommend having your vertical lock on when you're doing anything in here that you're going to be moving around quickly. If you don't, it's really easy to become disoriented and have the floor be above you, and that can induce some dizziness. So if you're going to be designing an object for a long time, I recommend just having this on. If it's something that's going to be grounded, the world axis and the stage floor are important. I'm going to turn that off for now. So what I do is I want to make sure that I'm designing with intent. So what does that mean? I know that I'm going to be designing a backpack. I know that a backpack needs to interface with the human body. So I brought in a mannequin, put him in his own layer, and just, gave him a quick position of what a person wearing a backpack would do. So maybe holding his straps like this, just so that I have a sense of human scale and I can make sure that's there. The second thing is I know this object that I'll be designing is symmetrical. So I'm going to turn on my mirror plane. And that way, anything I do on one side will carry over to the other side. That way, I'm only focusing about designing stuff on one, and then it'll automatically carry over. That's another advantage of designing in virtual reality. Another tip I want to give you is when you're doing any kind of object or shape or design, always look at it from multiple angles, from multiple points of view, and make sure you're not just designing in a plane or from a side or from a specific view. That's traditional two-dimensional sketching. That's one of the drawbacks of it. One of the huge benefits of 3D sketching is you can really just get it from any position and draw whatever you want. So I usually start by doing just very quick lines like that to get an idea of volume, proportion, gesture, those things that we talked about there. Just to start getting fluid lines in space. Another way that I usually start is by bringing in references. So I'll show you what I do here. Basically, I already have them. So what I did is I pulled from our website. This is just some images. And I placed them in space. Where are those references here? Where I want them to be. What I suggest is that you anchor them. When you're holding something, it's that blue button that you can see there with an anchor, so that when you move this space, they stay in their location. But this way, I have my original sketch idea, some products, photography in context, and then just multiple views of what this object looks like. So the next thing I did here is I took some measurements. I know roughly what the dimension is from the top to the bottom here. I kind of know what the dimension is, as well as the depth. So how thick that is. With those, I'm able to lay out kind of a specific height and depth to this object as well. Now, when I have those, I'll just delete this, lock everything. The next thing I did was, like we talked about it, I extrapolated two-dimensional views. So I already have the front view. I just needed to do that side view. So I sketched them next to each other to be able to get these. These are my orthographics, and these are going to drive my plan sketches that I use to get those 3D curves. So what I do is pull these, make sure that they snap, and pull them into, you can see that it definitely snaps into a planar view. And this one, I want to snap into the middle plane there. And then just make sure that they're kind of over each other, and in scale, that they're also, you know, two different views of the same object. Let me go back. I think that's roughly, so the person wearing that backpack and how it would look from the side. Yeah. From there, yeah, I did a few rough sketch lines like we talked about earlier. This is where I focus on unconstrained drawing with speed and expressiveness. You know, I'm not too worried about being exact here. I just want to get that gesture and those lines kind of how I want them to be. And then again, like I was saying, drawing from every angle and also kind of pulling and seeing how, okay, so if this line is both influenced by the side and the front, what does that look like in 3D space? So something like that. Same with this line going like this. And then you can really start seeing a volume appear. So this is what immediately replaces a two-dimensional sketch. It's a 3D sketch like this. It can be messy. I suggest that it is, because you're really just trying to get a gesture of this object and start to visualize it and see it. I suggest keeping everything on separate layers so that you can toggle the visibility on each on your own, and it doesn't really interrupt your idea. Here you go. That's basically slight shape of it. From here, I'm going to make that just a little bit lighter, and that's where I have the full curvature of this object, or the 3D lines that make up the wireframe. And this is what we talked about, that form finding of the object. So how did I get to this point? So very quickly, I'll demonstrate that. I'm just going to pull back these orthos back to about this level. I'm going to just do another curves layer so you guys can see. Cool. So a few tips about getting really accurate line control. I'm not going to focus too much on how I use the tools. This is just the one that I think it's very important. There's a lot of YouTube resources and other tutorials for this, but basically I just want to share how I use the line tool, because to me it's the most important way to establish the shape of an object. So I go into point mode. I'll show you why. I have the stroke line. Basically, I just want to, this is a fundamental for form building anything accurately, I would say. So clicking one point and then clicking the second point. So that's how you get a straight line, is 2 points. If you go and edit the line, adding a third point in the middle allows you to get an arc or tension in that line. You can add this tension in any direction, of course, since this is three-dimensional. And then basically having these two lines, the 3 points at a straight angle, will give you a perfect arch. That's going to be the basis for 7D modeling as well. And now if I want to have a corner or a radius, then I just do 3 points around where I want that corner to be. The farther they are from each other, the softer that round is. And of course, the closer they are, the tighter that corner will be. And this can be in any direction, of course, like we showed before. Cool. So how do I get this object like that? Basically, I'll start with a slightly smaller shape. I'll go into planar mode because I want to establish this on the centerline plane. There we go. It's matching with the mirror, and you can see that the projection is right on that plane. And I'll get a little bit closer. I'm going to start with the lid here and just start putting points. You can see if I want this to change direction, I'll do 3. I'll do another one here to add a little bit of curvature. Here's another round, so I'll do 3 there, 1 in the middle, and then 1 in the end. I do want these to be expressive, like my sketch, and have that speed and fluidity. And you can achieve that by changing the width of each point. So there you already can see that this line is getting a little bit thinner. I'll go ahead and put a few more in space just to make this go quicker. You can always, here's another tip, you can always go in and modify any object that you draw virtually. Nothing is set as you have it. So I would not worry about getting it perfect at the beginning, just laying it out and modifying later. And I want to make sure I just have some of the key lines that make up this object depicted. I think want to make sure I get the volume, give it a little bit of curvature. And I think the last one is this one here. Okay, so let's say I feel very confident about this shape from this view. Now I want to make sure those lines match this view. And how do we do that? So the next thing I would do is grab this line, and remember everything is mirrored. So what I'm going to do, before I do that, let me lock my view. And like I showed you when doing this workflow is the pulling lines from 2D sketches. I already showed you how to do kind of freeform sketching. This is the second one. What I'm going to do now with a little bit more precision is pull those lines from space. Go and edit them, make sure they're not planar anymore. And now from a second view, I can start modifying that shape. You can always add points, of course, and connect to the center. So here's what I was talking about. It really pays off to see it from many angles. And already you can see I'm getting a 3-dimensional depiction of that shape by looking at it from where I want. So maybe this corner needs to be a little bit softer. And remember, I do that by pulling the points away from each other. Look at it from every side just to make sure you have a good flow happening. Maybe this one, I want to get a little shorter so that it's going. I'm just going to pull a few more. This line needs to match here. I don't need planar sketching anymore. Okay, and the next very big important one, let me look at my references. Again, I know that this zipper line is very important. It drives the direction of the object, which I drew here. And that from a side view is this line. So I want to make sure that's depicted very well. So I pull that to about where I think it should be from this direction. And again, go and modify it. Remember to take it off planar here. And this would be that pocket from the side. And this has to have a little bit of arc. Again, I'm using every single view I can to define this object. I'm going to, okay, at this point, hide those orthographics just to see how everything's looking. And I can already see the gesture of that object coming in from most angles. I'm gonna bring up the mannequin again, maybe like this, to see how it's interfacing. And yeah, you can see just really quickly already, I have a shape determined. Cool, I'm gonna jump ahead a little and show you, just make these a little bit lighter. And these are the fully defined lines I had before. So again, it's great to see them all in space. Here's another tip. Once you have a wireframe like this, everything shows up at the same darkness if it's on the same layer. So what I like to do is, where is it? Fill it up with a white volume. And how you do that is with this volume tool. I just set that to white and literally fill it in. You know, the way this works is you just start in every direction and it just keeps filling. So basically I fill it all in to make sure only the outer lines show up. And then I take that layer. Oh, let me go back slightly. I did that on this layer and then just make that a little more transparent. So that way the outer lines or the lines closest to you are the darkest. Let me hide these references so you can really see it. And the lines far away are lighter. That way you can, from any angle, you can really see the object there. Cool, I would say once you get to the stage and you have your lines defined, I would really spend my time, that was one piece of advice, defining and getting confident at creating lines in space. That's gonna be the structure for your objects. And you can really visualize something with just the lines there. Once you have the step nailed down, creating the surfaces becomes really easy. And the surfaces will, of course, drive your volumes. Cool, from here, I'll go in and talk about volumes and surfaces a little bit. I'm going to make a new surfaces layer. Now, hopefully you guys are familiar with the surface tool. This one, you can change the width, the tension, and the direction of a surface and just pull it into space, pretty unconstrained. You know, even above you, I would suggest just getting in there and creating a bunch of surfaces. You can also constrain them to lines, and that's what I usually do, and I'll show you here. So basically, once you have your whole line structure, I would lock that layer just so you don't mess it up. And then you can just really focus on using those lines as guides for your surfaces. You can, of course, add points and change the tension of a surface like we talked about before. You can use the lines as guides and the tool will follow. That's something I do quite a bit with this bridge curve part of it. And if I want to make more constrained point surfaces, just like we did with the lines, 2 straight lines or 2 points make a straight surface. 1 in the middle gives you tension, so you can have an arch. And again, you can add points around the surface, and the tighter they are, the closer they are to each other. The tighter that corner is, the farther they are from each other, the softer that is. Same principles apply as when you're creating curves. So I'll usually just focus on filling in surfaces with the same principle of the lines that I talked about. And I understand now that everything is mirrored across the plane. I still have that. So that's how I usually create. surfaces like this. Remember, you can just let go and always go back in and edit your surfaces and keep creating points as you go and just matching the points to the lines roughly and making sure they're mirrored in the center there. What we talked about before, again, if you have just a straight line, the surface is completely planar. By adding another set of points in the middle, so you can change the tension or the curvature. And that's how you get, gentle arcs and things. But there you go. Just by establishing lines, you can pull the surfaces from there really quickly. So this is what I did. These are the surfaces that I got from there. Again, everything is editable. Nothing is always set. So I can at any point go into any of these and edit them and change, the curvature, or I can add more points to get a little bit more detail if I wanted to. If you're emulating fabric or meshes or spans or anything organic like that, it's great because you can get really detailed and start adding ripples and really get nitty-gritty or detailed with your surface. And emulating cloth or anything like that is great because it'll really follow the highlights as you create these waves and undulations. So another important thing is on your left hand, you have the back in time clock. You spin that backwards and you can always undo your changes. So the beauty of the software is it keeps track of everything you're doing and you're never have to commit to a exact decision. You can go in, edit something, add more points, delete some, change whatever you want. It's never set in stone. I'll go back in there and redid what I did so that it's kind of how I had it. Cool. And like I was saying before, it helps to experience that object or that experience you're creating from many different views and perspectives. I'm going to turn off this mannequin and turn off the mirror just to be hidden. It's still mirrored, but I just hid it. So this way I can really see the object tiny, or I can see it in real scale in front of me, or I can stand up and wear it like a backpack and see what it looks like behind me. And this is where that experiential part really comes into play. This is how I would grab it and have it in front of me. So I would suggest that one thing, as soon as you get in there, just have a sense of what scale your object will be in the end, and then shrink it, look at it from far away, make it big, really get close to the details, see everything, and just experience it from as many sides and views as you can. Like I said before, it's also at this point, I do that back and forth translation a lot. Maybe I had enough time in this 3D session and I want to go back and sketch out more details. This is where it's really important to know that you can always take screenshots, set your view, changing the focal length and the perspective of the object, really get close and take pictures of details. That's where I was saying you don't have to worry about your drawing being perfect, because at this stage, you have all the lines that are important. You can pull these and then draw over them, whether that's on paper or digital sketching or whatever else. Let me take a compelling view here. Perfect. From this point, when I have the object done, most likely in its gesture, then I'll go and focus on the details. So I'll pull back my references and see what details this object really has that I want to worry about. So I know that these stitch marks are important. The buckle design that we have is very important, and the leather hits or the branding is very important. And the zippers, which are full loops, are very important as well. Those I just really started sketching on top of the surfaces. And I have those here. Let me just pull this up. And now the object really has life to it. And everything is kind of matching what I want it to be. Here's some of the zipper pulls. Again, everything is modifiable. You can place things where you want. You can multiply things if needed. Let's say this handle, I want it to be more of a peak like it is on the photo. And again, I have that just by making another stroke. Remember, you can get around by doing 3 points. The farther they are, the more gentle. I'm going to make it maybe tighter here on this corner. And there you go. These are just simple lines that, again, I have on a perspective. I mean, on a mirrored plane. And the last thing I want to show you is to make that buckle. Your strokes don't have to be circular all the time like I have them here. You can have, yes, of course, a circular stroke, but if you're doing anything that's more square or any other really profile, I would change that here. This is where you can have basically a flat stroke and dictate if you want something more rectangular, like a piece of wood, or the direction of the rectangle again. So if you look at this thing, and I'm going to take off the end caps. There you go. If you're establishing, let's say, framing for a house or a structure, and again, you can, same thing as I talked before, you can add tension to these things, pulling them, and then adding kinks and corners by making them tighter or looser. There we go. Cool. And now here we have the last thing I would do once I get to this stage, after pulling out some screenshots, and taking some pictures of this object from as many views as I think I need. Is to hold either a design review or do export to my preferred CAD program. You can even export this as an object that's 3D printable and go straight into the 3D printer. There's some really good tutorials on exporting and what to do with those files. But yeah, that's as far as I would go with an object like this. I think at this point, I'm going to pick up my headset again and maybe open it up for some questions, and we can maybe review some specific things you guys might have questions about. Yep, let me save here, exit. All right.
Yes.
Cool. Was everything visible? Did you guys see everything?
Yes.
Excellent.
Right on. Can you hear us well?
Yes, very well.
So first, thank you for the great introduction and the very quick overview of your workflow. I think it covers the basics both for the industrial design shapes as well as any other shapes. Yeah. You have shown us that you can play around with the scale and with the mannequin or any other objects that you would import to have a better overview of the scale. I think we will incorporate it quite nicely to our designs. There was one question already before we have started. It was about precision, how precise you can set things. We have seen that while you have moved the object or how you call it, snapped the object, there was like a number to define. Can you define the exact number of scaling or movement or whatever?
Sure, great question. So this deals with precision. How precise can you make something, right? Right now, I believe it's at the centimeter level, so plus minus 1 centimeter. What I would suggest is if you really have to get something in there precise, is to turn on the grid and make it small as possible, and then turn on snapping. So objects will snap to grid points, and basically that way you can go 1 centimeter, 2, 3, 4, the object will snap. You will feel a haptic, and then you will see the number as well. So you get visual feedback that it snaps. And then to double check that it is the right size, there is a measurement tool with the tool belt. So I would suggest looking into the tool belt or really understanding how to use the tool belt tools. The most useful ones there for precision are translation. So you can move anything in just a specific XYZ coordinate. So you're making sure you're moving it in a single direction instead of in space through the tool belt. And as you move it, you see the distance. So that's how you keep track of the measurement. The second thing I would really suggest, if you want to make sure you have precise object size and movement, is to first, and this is the second workflow, the sketch over a CAD package. So that you define your measurements, your dimensions in a 3D object in CAD, export it, and then bring that into Gravity Sketch at 1-to-1 scale. That way, you know your object that you brought in that's imported is at the exact scale that you want it to be. And then the lines that you go around it, that's your expressive modeling. Another thing, that's really great about the software is you can go in both directions as many times as you want. So you can export Gravity Sketch lines or surfaces back into CAD and then define the points there. You can give them dimension distances or sizing if you really need those measurements there after the fact. I still want to make sure that the purpose and the spirit of 3D sketching is that it's a sketch. It's just a sketch in 3 dimensions. So it's still supposed to be loose and not very constrained at the end of the day. I would still focus on doing most of my constraints in CAD, with whether that's Fusion or whatever CAD you're familiar with. That's where I go in and add measurements and dimensions. But I like to keep my virtual 3D sketches very loose and expressive because what I'm trying to capture is that energy and how it's really going to form itself from multiple views. If I'm doing something bigger than human scale, I'll put in mannequins and I'll measure the mannequins just to make sure that they are human size. I'll make sure I usually have two, a very tall person and a very short person at least. And then I'll draw around the mannequins so that I understand that what their experience would be. And like I showed you before on one of the little clips, it's important to zoom out all the way and see it from really far away and get the whole gesture of the thing, but also multiple times to zoom in to human size and experience it from inside or experience that bigger object from within if you're there. Cool. Any other questions? No.
Yeah, thank you very much. Actually, I have answered 2 of the questions because I want to go further with the explanation or with the ideas about really big spaces, like cathedral-like spaces, for example. Have you ever tried to do something really, really big, like architectural size spaces that goes really beyond the scale of the mannequin? And maybe it's not about the workflow that you have because you are an industrial designer, but what's the feeling inside of Gravity Sketch and how it influences the design when it's really, really big?
Yeah, absolutely. I've done bigger spaces. The rules are the exact same. I don't change anything in the workflow. One experience I had for a work project was I had to design the interior of an airplane because our products, we were experiencing them through like the narrow corridors and with all the seats and getting around people, and you're wearing something, you have to put it overhead. So all those things are the experiential part. So what I did was I got the dimensions of an interior airplane cabin. I very roughly modeled just the tube on the inside and the seats in CAD and I brought those in to Gravity Sketch. So when they showed up in Gravity Sketch and I got into the model, I was inside this airplane at the real size. And then I modeled the overhead cabins. I modeled the seats, very detailed. And we had a design review with some teammates inside this airplane with the objects, with backpacks and other objects we were talking about. So that's where it's really good to make these design decisions, is in the context of a space where you'll be using these objects. So yeah, for you guys, designing those spaces, the rules that I showed still apply. You can design it small or get the feel for it in front of you as if you would when you're sketching it. But the beauty of the software is immediately you can get inside of it and see what it's like from within. So if you're designing a cathedral, I would still sketch it, here, but then I go in and zoom into 1:1 scale. Just make sure from the start of your sketch, you have the scaling right. And I do that by just setting up mannequins and making sure that those people, the mannequins inside there, are real size. That way you can zoom in and out and always know what scale you're in very quickly.
Thanks.
Sure.
We have some questions. I would have one more then.
I might have one. So do you think virtual reality is definitely the future of industrial design, or maybe architecture as well? Or is it just like a nice thing to have, but we're still going to rely on that in the future?
I think it's just an extra tool that's very beneficial to have. I still draw every day. I still do CAD modeling every day, but now I do virtual sketching every day too. So what are the benefits? I definitely think it'll be an integral part, a very necessary part of work moving forward. Over the last year already, I've just seen so many designers get headsets. Why is it going to be really important? I think, first of all, the number one is just visualizing an idea right away in 3 dimensions. That's just huge time saver, whether that's a very tiny object or a cathedral, like we said. And secondly is the possibility to review work with your colleagues from wherever you are. So now that we're doing so many virtual meetings, it's just so important. Designers and architects and creative people designing 3-dimensional stuff, you still need to experience it and see it in 3 dimensions. So Gravity Sketch now allows that, and we can all go into the same space and review the same objects and edit it together and critique it and talk about it together. So for those 2 things, just quick visualization in 3D and design reviews, I think it's a game changer, and it's only getting better and better. I can say I've been using it for almost 3 years, and from the first time I picked it up, the tool was really basic. There were only a few different things you could do with it, but now it's so fully featured, and it's only going to get more and more and better features. So I wanted to make sure I was early to this technology to really understand it from the beginning. But right now, the barrier of entry is really low, and I think any designer should at least experience it or borrow one from someone else or try it out for sure. I'm very glad to see that you guys are all accepting and understanding the technology and starting to incorporate it into your workflows as well.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
Just the last question, just before
Sure.
To the collaboration feature, let's say. We
Sure.
have seen the collaboration in general throughout last year and a half, 2 years, has been extremely useful, like the communication tools like Zoom and so on. And we got used to it somehow. Do you think that virtual reality is also bringing the level and making the whole communication by designing, of course, architectural or industrial, to another, it's bringing it to another level and making everything much more efficient? Do you think that it's also the future of the communication in general, that we will be talking in a virtual reality and meeting in virtual reality, not through the cameras anymore?
I see. I hope so. Yeah, I think it just adds an extra level of that. I think what are the benefits are, I don't know if you guys have used apps like Spatial or even Google, Facebook's conference rooms. I think what it gives you is the feeling of being next to somebody there in 3 dimensions again. With Zoom, you're looking at a flat screen and the other person is looking at a flat screen from the other side, but you can only experience them like this. Whereas in a virtual space, if you're hanging out together, you can be here next to me and we can be looking at the same object or the same thing. Virtual whiteboarding is really good. We've been doing that a lot with our co-creation sessions. So instead of just even designing something, we'll set up a flat board and do whiteboard sessions or notes in 3D. The beauty of it is I can see where my colleagues are looking. I can understand what they're focused on and what their hands are doing too. So when we're reviewing something, you pick up another level of visual cues from people, which are harder to get from just a camera on Zoom. So yeah, just that spatial awareness of where other people are just gives you another sense for communication. I think it's just going to make it better. And like we did last week, I can be in the same room with you guys in co-creation and feel like we're there together, even though we're on different continents right now. So that's, yeah, a huge benefit, I would say.
Cool. Thank you very much once again for the collection, for showcase, for the workshop, let's say. Yeah, we hope that we're going to continue researching the topic. And maybe next semester we will also be on another level, so we could do a real workshop together in a collab.
For sure, in a collab, yes.
We'll see how it goes out. Yeah, thanks once again. And yeah, we're just going to design further. Thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you, Adam. Thank you, Nicolas. Thank you, everybody, for attending. I'd like to say, if you guys go in there and create something or any project, I would love to see it. So if you could share any of that with me. And yeah, if you guys have any further developments or next semester, I'd love to still, do more of a real immersive workshop and talk through maybe your specific issues or problems or design prompts or challenges and help you make sure that they're the best that they can be. Excellent. Yeah. Yeah.
Reality somewhere.
All right, for sure. Absolutely. See you in VR. Bye, everybody. Have a great day.
Bye.